Hello, everybody. We are going to get started today with today's brief, sustainable travel and our impact. I'm sorry if you hear loud crunchy noises in the background. That is my dog. But yeah, let's get going. I will introduce myself first, and then I will have my teammates introduce themselves. So my name is Callie Rouse. I am the one of the intercultural program advisors at CGIS, and my pronouns are she, her, hers.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ashton Troxel. My pronouns are she, hers as well. And I'm an intercultural programs advisor at CGIS along with Callie.
Hello, my name is Steven Gonzalez. I am the communication specialist here at CGIS, and my pronouns are he, him, his.
Great. So I'm going to get us started off with why it matters. Why are we talking about sustainable travel, and why is it important for students to think about? So first of all, the most obvious one is the local and global impacts that travel has on the world. The air travel industry as a total is a very large pollutant, and it contributes to large levels of pollution around the world. Additionally, wildlife can be really impacted by this kind of travel, not only just the carbon emissions that are resulting from people going from place to place, but also people going into communities and engaging in what we mentioned below, over tourism. That has impacts on the local wildlife and has impacts on how the ecosystem of that area where people are spending a lot of time, especially if they're within nature, how that is impacting the local population. And I think we saw really particularly the impacts of these kind of factors when the height of the pandemic was on, when a lot of people were in lockdown. For example, I think there were some places in India where there've just been so much pollution that suddenly they could see more because people weren't driving their cars everywhere, traveling everywhere, and you could actually see the mountains surrounding you, and dolphins being able to be seen in Italy. So it's really interesting what happens when everything grinds to a stop. Obviously, that's not a possibility. We're not going to all grind to a stop again. But it's really important to think about your impact, one of which being your carbon footprint. So airplanes and cruises are going to be pretty much our top negative impacts when it comes to travel. I think cruises are absolutely the worst. Luckily, our students do not generally go on cruises when they're going abroad, at least not that I know of. But we all have to get to our international destinations. However, it can be important to think about how often you're getting on an airplane. Are you just taking that airplane from here to your host city, or are you going all around Europe, jet setting from place to place, and what impact does that have? Another thing to think about is cultural norms around sustainability. So the US is better than some places, but worse than others. And in places where they have more stringent rules around sustainability, recycling, ecology, and things like that, it's really important to make sure that we are keeping to the local rules. There, not only could you face fines, but also it's just important to be respectful to the local community and potentially adapt to the way they get around. Danes, for example, heavily bike instead of using their cars, and looking into how you can kind of adapt to that. Another thing is just taking a critical lens in general to international travel. Like I said, it's not possible for us to, get on a boat and do a long sail across for a couple of weeks across the Atlantic or something like that. But it is important to think about what are we doing to make, things better, and how can we change the travel industry by our own behaviors to be less environmentally detrimental. And I already mentioned over tourism, so I am going to skip on past that and hand it over to Ashton.
Thanks, Callie. So there are things that you can do to be a more sustainable travel before you go. and while you're abroad. So one really fun part, I think, of traveling is, deciding what you're going to pack, planning your outfits for your different excursions. So what are some sustainable packing tips that you could adhere to? I will say there are some people in this call who like to carry multiple bags, even for a short weekend. I won't name names, but how can you pack lighter? Keep in mind that the heavier your bags are, the more fuel it takes to fuel an airplane or a bus or a train. So one really great tip is a capsule wardrobe. So if you don't know what that is, that's picking like 10 pieces of clothing that you can mix and match to create 20 outfits, for example. It's really great to probably start with a simple color palette that's like neutral colors with lightweight material that could be easily hand washed and that you could air dry as well. Also, don't bring big plastic bottles. If you're going to be abroad for a long time, it may be best to purchase like shampoo, conditioner while you're abroad. Or another option is opting for bar soap. So I know Lush carries bar shampoo, bar conditioner, and bar soap. So if that works for you, that would be really great. You just pop it into a tin that you can reuse and you get rid of the plastic waste altogether. But if there are items that you cannot get abroad in that specific country you're going to, you definitely do need to pack those. And also digital reading, whether it's magazines or books, try to, pop all of those onto your Kindle or your iPad just to reduce the weight of carrying multiple books and using, magazines, which could be a waste paper-wise as well. And then I'm going to pass it to Stephen.
So if reducing your carbon footprint is something that you're interested in, it's better to start planning for that prior to departure. And one thing that is like really interesting is that you can calculate your carbon footprint ahead of time, and you can even see how you're impacting the environment right now today. So websites like TerraPass help you calculate your own personal carbon emissions. It's a very easy quiz. It will ask you questions about the types of car, the type of car that you drive, if you take any public transportation. It also asks questions about your energy use at home and a few other questions. All of this will give you an idea of your own carbon footprint and where you can implement some of those changes. In regards to travel, some ways you can decrease your carbon footprint is selecting nonstop flights, right? So NASA actually has some numbers out, and it states that 25% of airplane emissions occur during takeoff and landing. So if you're going on a lot of short haul flights, you tend to have a higher per pound footprint. Selecting economy is also another way to decrease that carbon footprint. In fact, traveling in business or first class can be several times as damaging as seats in economy to the environment. And calculations actually show that a business class passenger takes on average up to 2.5 to 3 times as much space in an aircraft as an economy class passenger. And the ratio of first class to economy class space occupied per traveler is even higher. In some cases, six or more times higher than economy. So ultimately, we're starting to notice that space is the key factor here, right? Ashton is going to talk a little bit more in depth about the benefits surrounding public transportation a little bit later, but definitely consider taking transportation to the airport as a way to decrease your footprint prior to departure and starting your trip off on the right foot. Another thing to consider is traveling outside of peak summer months. I know winter may not be as appealing to you, but honestly, there are way less tourists, which means waste pollution is down, price drops significantly, and you can get to see a completely different side of the country that you're visiting. I've traveled abroad in February, and it was actually so nice to not have to worry about long lines or waits at restaurants, which really did make my trip kind of perfect. And lastly, just a friendly reminder to do what you can to save the earth before you leave. Some of you may not have to worry about anything like this, but if you do, Don't forget to turn off and unplug your appliances so that you're not contributing to energy waste while you're traveling. Cool. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about where to stay, what to eat, and how to invest in your local economy. As someone who's experienced hotels and hostels abroad, I can tell you there's not a huge difference other than the access to certain amenities, which is honestly not a reason why I travel. But when you break it down, the big difference is honestly energy waste. And I hadn't really thought about this until we kind of started this project. But it starts to make a lot of sense, especially in how hostels run. In hostels, you get less than what you get in a hotel, like fresh towels and sheets. But you don't need that stuff. You don't do that at home. You're not changing your sheets every day. You're not getting new towels every day. So why do you need to even worry about something like that abroad? Most hostels are big on community. So usually they have community rules, and these just ensure that while you're staying there, you're contributing to the space in a positive way, much like making wise decisions when it comes to decreasing your carbon footprint. Hostels usually provide pots and pans so that you can cook yourself, right? And there's not this entire staff like in a hotel cooking and wasting a lot of that energy. There are recycled books and movies in hostels, and all that's meant to be shared amongst guests. There's usually one refrigerator for the entire hostel versus each hotel room maybe having like their own individual refrigerator. And usually in hostels, you'll get a towel. I don't want to like say that you're not going to have like a towel, you're not going to have sheets. They'll likely not be cleaned every single day. Which means energy isn't being expelled as much, like in hotels where you're having to worry about industrial washers and dryers. Okay, so what are you eating? Or what do you eat? I don't think we have a lot of time to go into the reasons why the meat industry is bad for the environment, but choosing vegetarian options is always a great way to help with that personal carbon footprint. Also, if you're eating local, that likely means that you're getting or they're getting that produce from local farms, which is a great way to invest in the local community, which I'll talk a little bit more in just a second. And kind of to Ashton's point that she made a little while ago, carry reusable water bottles instead of having to worry about plastic water bottles and purchasing them throughout your trip. There are plenty of places abroad where you can access public water, as well as airports. And then in the same breath, remember, if you're studying abroad, if you're cooking your own meals, then don't forget about reusable containers. I mentioned investing in the local community, and that means investing in the local economy. I think oftentimes we forget about the weight that our money carries, especially when we go abroad. And much like the benefits to shopping with small businesses here in the US, it's important you keep the same mentality overseas. Remember to pick local guides. Airbnb experiences is a prime example of how you can do that. Airbnb experiences allows locals to provide many different fun and creative services for people interested in getting to know what locals do. In a previous brief, we have talked about how there are experiences such as local family cooking, where you pay a small fee and you join them in their family dinners. It's also a great place to find tour guides and photographers, and also photographers who are also tour guides. I actually had an opportunity to do that kind of Airbnb experience the last time I went abroad, and it's kind of nice to have someone take your photos. And then visit parks and protected areas, because those funds that are contributing to protected areas further fund these sustainable efforts to keep those ecosystems clean and free from pollution. And then also, lastly, actually, avoid Western-owned stores. I know sometimes it's hard to do it. I know in some briefs we've told students, like, when they're feeling homesick, go to your local McDonald's to make you feel like, you're in the US. And that's certainly important. But there are a lot of local stores you can be checking out. I know like H&M is popular all over the world. Maybe check out another store that you may not be able to access when you're in the United States.
Thanks, Stephen. So in terms of transportation when you're abroad, I really encourage you to do research on the different types of transportations and the actual companies, the transportation companies. Because if these companies are doing good, sustainable work, they're probably going to be bragging about it. As you can see, there's a Eurostar little infographic here. It is encouraging people to take their trains, because one flight is the same as making 13 Eurostar journeys. So the Eurostar goes from London to Paris, Amsterdam, and I think also to Brussels, and there are some stops along the way. So that's one important thing to think about. Also, utilizing public transportation. When a lot of us go to abroad, we're put into walking cultures, which I think is such an amazing experience, especially if you're from the Midwest and you have to take a car everywhere you go. So take advantage of that. Really enjoy slowing down, enjoying your 45-minute commute, whether it's a bike ride or a combination of walking and riding a local bus, because taking that time is going to be more sustainable for the earth. And it also might be more sustainable for you to just slow down a little bit. I think the infographic on the right-hand side is really powerful and can show you how we're utilizing space and reducing waste by using bikes or riding on a bus versus everyone driving. And speaking of slowing down, we always encourage students to take full advantage of their host city or their host country versus jet setting every weekend. We really encourage students to get off the beaten path and look beyond those quintessential tourist destinations that you feel like you have to get for Instagram, because you could be reducing the burden on those over-visited destinations and bringing tourism to other places, to other local economies that could really benefit from it. And you could also be more immersed if you just stay in Rome for 4 months. I promise you there are going to be activities you can do every weekend. You can be more engaged with the local community, learn the language, and really grow from that experience. And finally, respect. So if you, go to a church and they require you to cover your shoulders, like those are some little things. But some bigger ones are, when you go camping here in the US, you pack it in, you pack it out. It means you leave things as you found them. So we were talking earlier about how a lot of Americans like to take sand from beaches and how, your little bag of sand isn't making a difference. But when 100,000 people are taking a little bag of sand, how much of an ecological impact it's making on that society. So leaving things where they are. I know when I was in Paris, I took a tour of the catacombs, which is full of bones. And at the end of the tour, there was a person wanting to look in my bag, and I had this confused look on my face, and he pulled up this tarp and there was a bunch of bones under it because people were actually stealing the bones. So just being respectful of the communities and leaving things where you find them is really important and sustainable for future people to continue to enjoy them. And in terms of cultural norms, I think when I studied abroad, I came from a small Midwest town. Recycling was not really a thing. And I was really confused about the trash, all the different ways to recycle, the trash procedure when I was in France. This example here is from Germany. They have a different trash can for each different type of material, which may be confusing if that's not something you're used to. You may not know the language. So this is something you should definitely research before you go abroad. Because for example, in Germany, if you get caught recycling the wrong way or throwing waste out incorrectly, you could get fined 10 to 1,500 euros, which that's like 2,000 American dollars, which should not be good. And also using reusable bags. I think that's pretty common in most other countries. I think here in the US, we're getting better at reusable bags, but when you go to the Carrefour in France, they literally have no bags. So you're going to be looking silly trying to shove your bread and all your fruit into your backpack with your heavy books, because your bread is definitely going to get smashed. And then another note is on dryers. As I mentioned earlier, when I was talking about capsule wardrobes, having those lightweight materials like linens that's going to be your best friend, because you're going to be air drying all of your clothes, most likely. Most countries don't have big dryers like we do here in the US. And I know, Callie, you had mentioned earlier about the voltage difference between like US voltage and European or other countries. So instead of like bringing your hair dryer or your hair straightener, maybe opting for a more sustainable hairdo, whether it's a good air dry or some cute braids. Just think about that before you go abroad, because that is a small way you can reduce your carbon footprint as well.
Great. Well, now I'm going to close us out with a couple of resources that could be helpful to you. So first off, our One Bag and the SUNY Sustainable Packing Guide. So for ideas of what to bring and what not to bring when going abroad. Also linked to the TerraPass carbon footprint calculator that Stephen mentioned earlier. We have local travel, and this is a website that kind of helps you get a little bit more off the beaten path into other kinds of travel that's a little bit more like traveling like a local. If you are looking to, kind of offset your impact by engaging in volunteer activities, maybe towards like the ecology center or something like that here in Ann Arbor, there's volunteer match of things to look into. If you're looking to contribute to the place you're going to, or some other place nearby, thinking about doing workaways, which are where you get free room and board in exchange for working for a local community resource or business. I knew like a student who, for example, worked with a beekeeper and like helped collect honey, and somebody else who worked with a local community that helps serves refugees that are in Greece. Those are a couple of examples of how people have used Workaway after their like study abroad experiences or on their own independent travel. And also we have some tips down below in the last two slides. Next time we're going to be talking about documenting experiences abroad ethically. That's going to be on March 17th, same link, same time. I'm excited for this one. I was in my previous role, I worked with our Bonnerman Fellows who go on 8-month journeys, traveling around the world and writing blogs about their experiences. And we talk a lot about being able to document your experiences in ways that do not negatively impact the people you're talking about. And also just being respectful to people when you're like taking photos of them and things like that. So I'm super excited for that one. That will be next month. It's actually exactly a month from today. Yay, February. But yeah, that's that.